Well, everyone, it's time for us to take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A14 and compare it against the iPhone 12 and see which specific phone you should go and pick up. Now, by all means, I would 100% recommend picking up the iPhone 12, but the Galaxy A14 is still very interesting because you have to keep in mind the A14 is like a $200 phone, less than a $200 phone in a ton of places. So it may make a little bit more sense to buy a phone like this over the iPhone 12 in some regions, but I will leave both these phones linked down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside, on the front, you can definitely tell the iPhone 12 has a little bit of a smaller 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display, and in my opinion, this was honestly a pretty good panel. I think when this phone came out in 2020, it was a pretty good, decent panel, and it still is holding up decently well. Again, it's not going to be like the best performing panel of all time anymore, but I would say this is definitely a better performing panel than the Galaxy A14, and I definitely do think anybody would probably agree with that. But you are getting a bigger notch than the Galaxy A14, but you're getting slimmer bezels overall on the iPhone 12 than on the Galaxy A14. Now the A14 is technically like a newer budget type of phone that Samsung made, and I definitely do think this is a decent approach. I think it's kind of a better looking phone than their previous generations, and I actually do think there's a lot more similarity than there are differences between these two phones in terms of kind of how they're built, not in terms of really much along that, but the design kind of is very similar, at least with the flat sides. That's kind of what I'm mostly alluding to here. But beyond that, you're getting on this phone a 6.6-inch PLS LCD panel, but this time Samsung is bringing a 90 Hz panel on this one. So before we had a 60 Hz panel here, now it is actually a 90 Hz screen, which is actually pretty crazy because this phone is like less than $200 in a ton of places. So that is honestly a pretty wild thing to keep in mind here. So that in and of itself is actually pretty crazy. Now beyond that, again, opening apps and stuff, I'll test that a little bit further out in a second. But if we kind of move on to the sides, this is the one thing that kind of mentioned earlier. So you can actually see both these phones kind of have a little bit of a flat side to them. I think the iPhone 12 definitely feels way more premium for sure, but it is very interesting to see how both these phones have very similar stylings, at least with the flat sides here. But the Galaxy A14 is definitely a much bigger phone for sure. On the bottom, we do have a Lightning port on the iPhone 12. We have a USB Type-C port on the Galaxy A14, including a headphone jack, which is honestly pretty crazy. A lot of phones don't have that type of capability anymore. The Galaxy A14 does have that, which is so cool. Now on the back, we do have a little bit of a different camera setup for sure. The Galaxy A14 has that triple camera setup, where the iPhone 12 has that dual camera setup. So we'll talk about the cameras in a second. We also have this plastic back on the Galaxy A14, where the iPhone 12 has the standard glass back. But a big thing to keep in mind here is that with the Galaxy A14, it is kind of like this weird texture that actually feels really good. And for a plastic back, I think they did a decent job. It's like frosted, but not really. And I definitely do think it feels a little bit more interesting than the way the Galaxy S21 felt with its frosted glass back. So, in terms of the outside, what I'll definitely tell you is it is kind of surprising that such a budget phone like the Galaxy A14 has some interesting things going on for the outside. So for one, it has, still kind of similar design, but not really. It has a triple camera setup, which may not be better than the iPhone 12s, but it's still kind of interesting. It has 3 cameras. It does have a microSD card slot, and it does have a 90 Hz panel, which is honestly pretty insane. So pretty big stuff to keep in mind there. Now with the iPhone 12, another big thing to keep in mind here too is that this panel and this phone overall, I think, are probably going to last longer than the Galaxy A14. So this is pretty much expected. When you have a phone like the iPhone 12, this is going to be a phone that's going to last you still probably longer, even though this phone has been out for almost 3 years this year. It's still going to last you longer just because it's, Apple just does a great job with their support. I think the Galaxy A14 is still probably going to last another 2 versions of software, so it's going to be getting One UI 6 and then One UI 7, depending on how Samsung is going to support this thing. So I think that's a really cool thing, and beyond that, for a budget tier phone, again, I think that is a really cool thing that Samsung is doing here. So really big stuff here for sure. Now let's go into a speed comparison between both these phones. The iPhone 12 has that Apple A14 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 gigabytes of RAM, where the Samsung Galaxy A14 has that Exynos 1330 chipset inside of it with 4 gigs of RAM on the base model, 6 gigs of RAM on the mid-tier model, and then 8 gigs of RAM on the top-tier model. So let's go and see which one's the faster phone between both. Okay, there we go. Hopping out of the apps in the background, you can see they're all cleared out. Phone call is 321. And definitely the iPhone 12 was faster there. Let's get into their app stores, 321. And surprisingly, the Galaxy A14 was faster here. iPhone 12 a little bit behind. Let's go and kind of scroll through, and even though we have a 90Hz panel in the Galaxy A14, which is actually kind of smooth, the iPhone 12 I think still feels kind of smooth too. It seems like it's not glitching up as much. But yeah, it definitely looks like the Galaxy A14 glitches up just a little bit more here, but not like that big of a deal. Hopping out of this one, settings 3, 2, 1. Pretty much the same thing, not a big difference there, surprisingly. We do have some of these third-party applications we can kind of test. We can try Temple Run 2, 3, 2, 1. I don't think I opened it up on this application or this phone yet, so if it's substantially faster on the iPhone 12, maybe it's something to keep in mind. Okay, so we did get glitches on both. I kind of hopped out of both of them as fast as I could, but the glitch came up faster on the iPhone 12. I think that does kind of stem down to the performance as well. Hopping out of this one, we can go into the next application, which is probably, let's do Temple Run, the original one, 3, 2, 1. A lot of Temple Runs we're starting off with, but that's typically how these comparisons kind of go. And surprisingly, the Galaxy A14 did get into it. We did get into this pop-up here, and we did get into the game. So not quite apples to apples here, but still the A14 kind of got into it a little bit faster. Maybe, who knows? Stack, 3, 2, 1. And again, I mean, the Galaxy A14 did get into the ad a little bit faster on the Galaxy A14 than on the iPhone 12. Kind of another thing to keep in mind. Let's do thank you, 3, 2, 1. And the Galaxy A14 loaded that one up faster. The iPhone 12 a little bit behind. Very, very surprising here. Let's go and hop out of this one. Let's go and get into the next one. Let's go and try Twitter, 3, 2, 1. And very similar performance on both. And even that stuff right there is very, very surprising to me. So I will go and kind of say that when it comes down to it, I don't know if one is like the way faster one for sure. I think the iPhone 12 is going to be the faster one when it comes down to it. But it is surprising to me that the Galaxy A14, for those small apps that I tested, actually held up that well. So in terms of that performance, very, very surprising. I think the iPhone 12 is going to be better, but the Galaxy A14 still held its own for sure. Now, in the camera department, like I mentioned, you are getting a triple camera setup on the Galaxy A14 and a dual camera setup on the iPhone 12, but there are some pretty big differences here. For one, the iPhone 12 has a proper wide and ultra-wide camera. The Galaxy A14 has a wide macro and depth lens, so it's not as crazy featureful, I would say, as the iPhone 12's camera, which can do 4K at 60 on the front and the back. The Galaxy A14 can only do 1080p. So looking through the whole entire, performance and camera quality of this specific phone, it is a decent camera still. I mean, this camera still has a ton of capability. You have video mode, photo mode, portrait mode. Like, this is a very good quality lens, and overall, it's still one of like the best cameras you can buy in 2023, even though it's like a 3-year-old phone, because this camera quality is still very good. With the Galaxy A14, on the other hand, like, this isn't a bad camera. It just so happens that it's kind of like not really a good camera when it comes down to it. I think we all know this. So one thing I would definitely tell you is actually, zooming out, it's just 1x zoom, zooming in 10x zoom, which is most of it is digital since there's not like a hardware lens here. You are still getting a lot of features built into this camera though, which has always been cool. So you can see, I mean, the quality of this lens isn't going to be that great, but you still have features built in, which is nice. So I'll definitely tell you the iPhone 12 is better, but I'm assuming the Galaxy A14 is not going to be that bad either. So when it kind of comes down to it, what I'll tell you is that I definitely do think the Galaxy A14 for its price tag is actually not that bad. It's pretty decent when it kind of comes down to it. I think there are some weird things going on with this phone, but other than that, like, I definitely do think it could have been way worse, and this phone really isn't that bad. I think with the iPhone 12, Apple did a really good job with this phone back in 2020. I think it's had some weird issues here and there, but since then they fixed a lot of things, and I don't think it's like a bad deal at all. And I think this is definitely the phone I would highly recommend buying. But I think the Galaxy A14 still sits in a very, very interesting spot as well. So in terms of that, it kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.